Hi, my name is Deanne Barr. I am the author of such psychological thrillers as Expired Listings, Slashing Mona Lisa, and the upcoming domestic suspense thriller, Saving Grace, a psychological thriller, which just went on pre-sale with Amazon, so please rush out and pick it up. I am going to speak today with Stephen H. Smith, who's a little bit of a clairvoyant because he wrote a book a while ago that just came out, and it's about a pandemic. It is actually something worse than COVID-19, if you can believe it. And he's going to talk all about how he got the idea, how he researched it. And he's got a little surprise at the end of the interview that I'll think you'll want to hear. So please sit back, enjoy, and as always, please stay safe. Welcome to a new edition of Author Groupie. I'm here with Stephen H. Smith. He is an engineer for the largest professional services provider in biopharmaceuticals, and he has worked with some of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies for over 35 years. He has designed and operated research and production facilities internationally and has lived in Switzerland and France as well as China while starting up facilities there. Stephen is a commercial pilot, a glider pilot, a ground instructor, and an instrument flight instructor for the past 30 years. And he was previously the chief flight instructor for the Lexington Flying Club in Lexington, Kentucky. He moved to Cincinnati 4 years ago, and he has just finished putting his triplets through college, which is quite an achievement in itself. Because all that didn't keep him busy enough, he has spent the past 10 years teaching English as a second language and has devoted 3 years to writing his first novel, The Iceman Kills. Welcome to Author Groupie, Stephen.
Thank you, Dawn.
I've got lots of questions for you. You are my first pharmaceutical engineer, so please tell me, what exactly do you do?
So what I do in engineering for the pharma companies is mostly to design the facilities. So it might be anything from insulin to heart medications, something for any type of disease. And yeah, those plants are in various locations, mostly in the United States.
Very interesting. So tell us about this book. What exactly is it about?
So The Iceman Kills is about survival in a word. And it's survival of the world. And unfortunately, it's a very true scenario. So you read it, it's fiction, it's enjoyable, I think, but you'll find that it's biological terrorism, and it's something that can really happen. And hopefully when people close the book, they have that idea in their minds and they think, wow, we need to do something. But yeah, in a nutshell, what it's about is the CIA and the CDC forming a team and going after what they think is bioterrorism aimed at the United States. And yeah, very interesting book. It goes in 4 different continents and multiple countries. And they end up with a couple of protagonists that make the book more exciting.
And it involves the pandemic in 1918?
It involves the Spanish flu pandemic that occurred in 1918, as you know, and there's actually a true story behind it I found after I had written about 1/3 of the book. But I started writing the book and came up with the idea that somewhere in the world there might still be some residue of the Spanish flu. And they actually, you can see from the book, there's an iceberg below the water here, of course, and we have a syringe injecting into it and a globe, which hopefully appears here so you can see. But the idea is that the terrorists spent a lot of money. They were well funded, and they spent a lot of money. They looked all over the world, and they found a cadaver that was in Antarctica, represented by the iceberg. And they went and recovered that and found the Spanish flu and mutated it, made a synthetic flu if the Spanish flu wasn't bad enough. Comparison. You have COVID-19. So far in the past 7 months has unfortunately had about 500,000 fatalities. So you might expect in rough numbers, the tragic results after a year of this might be 1 million people, 1 million fatalities. With the Spanish flu, which was anywhere from 50 million to 100 million. And migrate that, take that to the next step, which is the Iceman kills, take it, make it into a synthetic and make it even worse. It's some number 2-3 times, 50, 100 million. So you're talking about something that is enormously worse than COVID-19. Just to stress this out one more second. Virus, you may recall the Spanish flu, people that were of the age of Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, it went after that age. It didn't go after the typical flu, the people that would typically get the flu, older and younger people. And so it goes after the military, that middle age. Interesting. Combination.
So tell me, other than wanting to inspire mass panic, like we haven't had enough of flus, what inspired you to write the book, and when did you begin working on it?
I was inspired by what I do. So, well over 35 years I've been in pharmaceuticals and do a lot of piloting, a lot of instructing over a lot of years. And so a lot of the book is about going a lot of different places. And Matt Bowman, the protagonist, was a flight instructor, and he did that in the Air Force, very successful. And the CIA tapped him and said, "We want you to come over here." So yeah, I was inspired by those two things, what I have done. And that's the premise of writing. You write what you know, and it comes out really well on paper if you do that.
Sure. So obviously your piloting and your traveling experience played well into this. Did you know 4 years ago when you started writing the book that the coronavirus might cause a worldwide pandemic?
Yes, actually I knew the day and time that it was coming. No, I of course I didn't have a clue, but I did feel like the bioterrorism was something that was coming, and I still do. So the book is really not about COVID-19. It's not about what we're experiencing now. You look at it and you might say, well, I don't know if I want to read that book. I've been isolated. I have to do this all the time. I wear the mask and all this stuff. But what the book is about is the time before, for instance, COVID-19. It's before that hits as a pandemic. But as I mentioned, it's really bad stuff. It is so much worse than something like COVID-19. And it's very realistic, unfortunately. And that really bothered me. In my mind, I'm thinking, it's out there. It's possible. It could, the Spanish flu could be recovered somewhere, or it could be stolen, which is probably not likely. But yeah, it could be found, and they could mutate it.
Wow. So the pandemic and the Iceman kills, you said it's a lot worse. How is it worse?
It's worse because when you take it into the lab, when you take something like the Spanish flu into the lab, something that's really bad to start off with, much worse. So in this case, at least 50 times worse as far as fatalities in a year. We know that for a fact. You start off with something like that. You take it into the lab and keep working with it until you get it to mutate and you find something that is even worse. And it's worse because you can focus it in on a group of people, an age of people that really damages your enemy. So in this case, the country that did it, and I won't tell you who that was because it would spoil it, but the country that did it, that helped them, looked at it and said, Spanish flu is what we need. We want to go after the military. We want to crush the United States military, fatalities, and we want the rest of the military on their backs in the hospital, and then whoever's left helping them. You know, you leave that country vulnerable. And they had it all planned out. Even the way it spread in the United States, when you read the book, you find that there was a very specific way it was spread. So was COVID-19 spread? It was spread by, you know, what we think may have either gotten out from a lab or a fish market or however it got out. Typical virus. It spreads and migrates from country to country fairly slowly. It's not what happened in the Iceman Kills. This story is where it spread in a matter of 2 or 3 hours. All planned out. It was spread in the United States throughout all of the 50 states simultaneously in a matter of a few hours.
Wow.
Very scary.
So how possible do you think it is that that sort of bioterrorism could actually happen? In other words, do you think COVID-19 could be a man-made virus?
Oh, it's possible. It could be. You know, what the scientists are saying is that the Chinese may have been mutating it in the lab and trying to work on a vaccine to prevent it from spreading. So, you know, if that happened, then, you know, that's the scenario. But yeah, you could, the bioterrorism aspect of it, despite COVID-19, whatever happened there, you know, happened, and, you know, maybe we'll find out someday. But what happens in the book is something that was planned and plotted out, and it was funded by a syndicate, a group of people from that country and from other countries who put hundreds of millions of dollars, perhaps, you know, billions of dollars, the number's not mentioned in the book, but that syndicate of some very rich people that wanted to go after the United States funded it. And they got scientists that knew what they were doing, and they took it into the lab and mutated it and made it really bad. And unfortunately, that's a real life scenario. You know, that could very well happen.
Wow. So knowing what you know now, would you have still written it?
I wouldn't write it in the same way because there are people that look at the book and they say, oh, I don't know if I want to buy that and read that. You know, I've had enough of it already. But there are, you know, still a lot of people out there who are saying, you know, that sounds interesting. You know, I'd like to hear about that. It's fiction. How bad could it be? And, but yeah, I think I would write it a little bit different and try to explain it a little bit different. And I have done that on my website and blogs to try to help people understand it's before the pandemic starts. It's trying to get it stopped before we get there. And when you close the book, what I hope people will take away from it is that we have to work together as a world, as the earth, as all the countries working together, because you can't have one holdout. It can't be something like Yemen or perhaps Afghanistan or somewhere that might harbor criminals or harbor bioterrorists. It's got to be the entire world working together. And people have to understand in all the countries, this is not something that we can hold out on because it'll go everywhere. If we hold out and we don't help another country or the US, it'll go everywhere.
Sure.
And just like COVID-19, there's no stopping it.
Yeah.
Now, I found a way around that. I don't think that's a realistic scenario, what I gave you in the book. But when you read the book, you probably won't recognize that. But there are ways of getting around that. In the book, maybe I shouldn't tell you this, but they do vaccinations. They see it and they say, wait a minute, this will go everywhere. They've got are pretty sharp people and they figure this out. You start vaccinating the country.
Sure. So, oops, hold on just 1 second. Can you tell me how the characters, especially your heroes and protagonists, were developed? Is Matt Bowman more like Jason Bourne or is he more like James Bond?
He's like neither. Matt Bowman and John Mann are the two protagonists. And they worked together really well, and they came back together totally by accident, which is a really good story, I think. Makes for a great chapter. But Matt Bowman is sort of like the original Ian Fleming James Bond, not like the ones you see in the movies that you watch and you say, "Wow, that is so great." You know, he jumped up in the air and he flipped 3 times and he flipped over again and brushed his teeth. And when he came down, you know, he had already taken care of the bad guy. The original Ian Fleming story of James Bond was about a guy who made mistakes, beaten up and got shot at. Matt Bowman is even more realistic because he's not really a CIA operative that goes to other countries. He's a pilot, very good pilot, and had a lot of success. And he's originally from South America. He was originally from Peru. So yeah, when you read it, you think probably how a real CIA person is. Not like James Bond, who it's like, you know, you think, wow, he's so sophisticated and so powerful. He is a black ops guy. In other words, he's a special ops guy. Had a lot of background in special missions. So he kind of fits that category.
Sure.
John Mann, who's the other protagonist. So yeah, they make a good team.
Were any of your characters inspired by real people?
Jean Min was. She was first generation or second generation American. Her mother came from China and somewhere else, but you don't learn about that until later on. So I don't want to spoil that surprise. But basically, let's say Jean Min her mother came to the United States and gave birth to her here. And she is very patriotic because of her mother and all she had to go through. And she comes right off the page and into your heart when you read it, because you realize that this is not just anybody you're reading about. This is somebody who goes out there and doesn't take no for an answer. And that's how they met. So in chapter 1, you find an airplane flying in the middle of the night, going to somewhere in the Caribbean, and it gets struck by lightning, and it gets a lot worse than that. So I won't tell you the rest of the story. Yeah, I really think. So Jean Min is on the ground, and she's heard about this, and she's heard about a plane that's diverting. Middle of the night, 2 a.m., she gets a call, and she's told what's happening. She goes over to the airport with a reporter, with a cameraman, filming the airplane coming in. That makes pretty good film watching that happen. It lands, they barely make it out. One of the guys goes to the hospital, and he's, taking this all in, asking questions, and she's thinking, not right. Something's not right with this story. She's not told these are people from the CIA and the CDC that are flying in. Any of this. All she knows is there's some airplane and they're coming in, and it is nothing like what she's saying. And that's how they all meet.
Interesting. So what kind of research do you do, and how long do you spend researching before you start a book like this?
I started doing research after I started writing it, for the most part. And what I researched was the real story of what actually happened. I mentioned that I'd written a third of the book. I got to that point and I thought, I wonder if this is really possible. Maybe this could have happened before. And I thought, well, this is really bad. What if somebody's written a book and written the same book? And I thought, I need to check into this. So Google helped me out, and Google was real friendly to me and took me to Breivik Mission, Alaska. And the very same thing happened, but on the other side of the planet. So this takes place in Antarctica. The real story took place, I found out later on, in Breivik Mission, Alaska, and there was a doctor that went up there, uncovered a body that he figured out was probably up there in a mass grave, and took tissue samples of an Intuit lady, Eskimo, sent those back to a pathologist in the United States. This is all a true story. They recovered pieces of the virus, lots of pieces, and they analyzed it. And after 10 years, they put all the pieces together and unraveled the RNA of the Spanish flu virus. Very famous story, all happened. So I thought, wow, that's really interesting. So you read the first 2 pages, the prologue, and it tells that story.
Wow.
And you find a different story, but on the other side of the planet.
So it sounds great. You're so busy. How many hours a day do you spend writing, and what's your process? I mean, how do you find the time to write a book like this?
Okay, so if my boss is listening, I never spend more than 15 minutes a night, Joel. Never, honest. If he's not listening, then I guess it depends. Sometimes I usually try to spend at least an hour, but you know how that goes. You've done this, I'm sure. You have a brainstorm, you come home, or you're like, I need to finish this story, and it was really exciting, and I think I can get to the end of it. So sometimes I may stay up a little past 9 p.m. writing. Try not to do that too often. I don't know. I guess probably on the average, maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours, probably an hour, hour and a half, per day, except weekends. And then I try to devote Saturday to writing and Sunday afternoon.
Excellent. So are you planning a sequel, or have you already started one?
That is a really good question. Yes, I did. I had several people reading the book saying we want a sequel. And so, yes, I spent a long time this time researching it, talking to my readers. I had what they call them, alpha readers, people that, will help you out, and, friends or people that you just know, and my editor, and came up with a really good idea. And I stopped because I got a telephone call. This was about a month ago. And the call was asking me if I wanted to go work on COVID-19 vaccine. And I said, oh, yes. I would love to do that. And so that's what I've been doing. I dropped the book idea and haven't gone back to it. I've thought about it every once in a while, thinking I really would like to do that, but no, I'm not writing right now. But I've got the idea. I'm good because it's the first part is still on paper.
So you're going to cure us all and come up with the vaccine for us.
I and 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 other people and another 2,000-3,000 contractors. It's a big team.
I bet, but thank you. Because I could use it.
A lot of really good people will be working on it. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm excited about your book. I hope that all of our viewers will go out and purchase An Iceman Kills. It's with Black Rose Writing. It is also on Amazon, correct? And where else can people buy it?
Wow, it's on 10 or 12 different places. The typical big outlets, Barnes & Noble. It's also on Amazon UK and Amazon Australia, whatever that's called. I call it Amazon Australia.
Sure.
Abe, it's on Google. I'm sorry, not Google. Goodreads. Sorry.
Goodreads, yeah.
Yeah, and if you get on Goodreads, you can actually click down and find the major distributors there too. So yeah, all the big outlets have it now.
Well, I hope it's a great success for you.
Working on an audio version too.
Oh, you are? Okay, terrific. When should that be out?
I'm not sure. I started checking up on it and or wanted to check up on it, and then when the vaccine war came along, I just kind of dropped it.
Well, I have to say, I wish you great success with it, but I wish you even more success with the vaccine.
Yes.
And thank you very much for joining me today. And please, please stay safe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
bridge over the river to the city far from home. The toll booth takes my money.